Hey, it's Vanessa for Crafty Gemini Creates, and in this tutorial we are going to be making this really cute softy doll. This is called the Kid Giddy doll, and the way we're going to make it is by cutting out our pieces of fabric to create the doll using the Sizzix die that's specifically designed by Kid Giddy. Now you can make a little girl doll, a little boy doll, and the die that we're using is this one right here. It's an XL25 die, and once you get it, it's kind of hard to see on camera, I think, all the different lines of where the individual pieces are, but there's a ton of different things here. You have the pieces for the head, the body, the arms, the legs, and then several different accessories that you can use to embellish the doll. The one that I made here has a little ponytail. You can add two and make pigtails. There's a bow, a pocket, a little tie. You can do a bow tie, and then the little glasses that she's wearing also. So the first thing you got to do is kind of grab some scraps because it's a great scrap busting project. Now I'm using a fabric here that is for the skin tone. You're going to put two of those, and notice you don't have to get too specific at chopping out the pieces that you need perfectly. I just grabbed a longer strip, folded it in half, and that way I know that the die is going to cut out two pieces. So that's for the face, the front and the back. Then we're going to repeat that and put two more pieces up here. I'm using just a black felt, and this is going to be for the hair, the front and the back of the hair. So place that on top of the head. For the dress that she's wearing here, I'm using this little floral fabric, and you're going to lay two pieces on here. Now, one tip, if you're using directional fabric, make sure that when you're laying it on the die, you are looking to see that you're laying it vertically and orient your fabric how you want it to be. So we're putting these flowers going up and down. And now if you notice, I'm overlapping the fabrics, and that's okay to do because the die is still going to cut around the pieces, and you can actually layer up to 8 pieces of fabric and run it through here. So if they overlap, that's okay. Right here we basically have 6 layers. Here we just have the 2. Let's work our way down here. We have legs and arms. For the legs, I just decided to do just one solid color and kind of make her look like she's wearing leggings. So here's the leg, and this is 4 pieces of that you'll need, 2 for each leg. Actually, let's do the hands first. You can see them here. You need 4 for that as well because there's 2 arms, front and back of each. Same thing for the legs, 4 of that. I have a little piece of red here. We're going to give her a little heart embellishment on this one. So there's a little heart here. I'll place that there. And then we'll do the little yellow glasses, which are down here. Once you have all the fabric laid on top here, you have to sandwich it between these 2 kind of pads, these acrylic pads that help protect the die and the machine that you're going to be using. So I'm going to be using the Sizzix Fabi, which is actually their smallest machine, and this die, because it's long and narrow, it fits perfectly on this one. So I have the little pads, one on the bottom here and one on top, and we're just going to feed it right through here. Let me walk on this side to get to the handle. All right, so once I feed it in a little bit, then I can kind of let the die go, and you have a handle up here, and you kind of just crank this right through. And in this one pass, all our pieces are going to be cut out. Okay, let's move this out of the way. Take off this one. Be careful with some of these accessory pieces. You can see that they're quite thin. Get rid of your scraps or put them in a scrap bin. There's our heart. Now for the fabric one, sometimes you'll see that there'll be little threads that are still caught. So in this case, snip them. You don't want to pull it because then you'll snag your fabric, okay? So after that, go ahead and separate all your pieces out. All right, so let's set this die and let's start working on our doll. You're going to have a bunch of different pieces, and it's kind of important to pay attention to the way that the doll comes together so that you do it in a way that makes some sense and comes together in the proper way, you know, because there's certain things that you need to sew at certain times. All right, so what I like to do first is start with my arms and legs, and you see that you have 4 pieces of each, okay? Same thing here. Lay them one on top of the other, like pretty sides touching if you were using a print fabric. For these solids, it doesn't really matter. But you're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you're going to stitch these up. Notice my samples here. Okay? Here are some different tips to keep in mind when you're working, making this project. I find that when I'm stuffing dolls, because I make other different types of dolls, when I'm working with dolls, I like to shorten my stitch length so that it's a tighter stitch and I can kind of stuff it a little bit better, I feel, without stressing out that seam to the point where you see the stitches. So I drop my stitch length down, back stitch at the beginning, work your way around. And if you've never sewn curves before, it's totally doable. It's not difficult, but you definitely want to take your time coming around these curves to come around here and then come back up and back stitch at the end. And you're going to repeat that to all 4 pieces. After that, Whenever you see that the stitch line goes and into a different direction, like for example here we have the stitch line is straight, and I of course used a coordinating thread that matches the skin tone, but I'm just going to mark it here so you guys can see it a little bit better. You see how that changes direction? The thumb on the doll is really tiny, so you want to definitely take your time when you're stitching around there, making sure to still maintain the seam allowance, come in, then pivot, and keep sewing around those curves, all right? So wherever it changes direction, you're going to want to snip, because when we flip this right side out to stuff it, the seam will be forced and the fabric won't give so that you can get the proper shape. So I just snip in here. Don't get too close to the stitch line, otherwise you'll cut into it. Just a few different little snips. And then what I usually find is helpful for me around the big curves, instead of cutting notches, because typically they'll have you kind of cut triangles in it. And one way to do it is kind of fold the fabric and slice it, and you can see how you get this little peak. So that's an easy way to do it. Or sometimes I find that I just take my pinking shears and it kind of has the same effect. Like that, okay? You're going to do that to the arms and the legs. Once you're done with that, you're going to want to turn these right side out to stuff them. So there's a lot of different tools on the market that you can use. But like I said, for doll making, other dolls that I make, I find that my hemostats are super helpful, both for stuffing and for turning things. So I'm going to show you real quick how I do it. I will come in here, put the hemostat all the way in there. And with my finger, I'm going to tuck in just as far as I can go here, but I'm going to push in the fabric a little bit. Then I close it and lock it in place. So it's not going anywhere. The fabric is not going to slip out of there. It's clamped, okay? And then I'll just work the fabric over the end of the hemostat. You see how easy that was? So that's one of my favorite ways to do it. Then you can come in here, and I know a lot of people like to use their purple thing to work that fabric all the way out. Be careful, because whatever it is that you're going to use to do this, like a chopstick or something, a little wooden dowel, you can use all kinds of things. Make sure that you just don't poke right through the fabric. All right, so you're going to work your way like this. If you want, give it a quick press with the iron, and then you're going to stuff it. Now to stuff it, let me show you all how I grab some of the polyfill and stuff it in here with the hemostats. All right, so we have a chunk of our polyfill here. What I like to do is just grab a little ball of this. Now remember, actually, before I forget, there's always a link in the description box below where you can find all the materials, supplies, all the stuff that I'm using for you to grab so you can get started on your project. So remember, that link is always there. But to use the polyfill, I just grab a little ball and kind of roll it into like a little nugget. I grab it with my hemostats. I will lay the leg or the arm, whatever it is I'm stuffing, in my hands and kind of make a circle around it. And then I just push the end of the hemostat in there. See that? And that way, if you're working with small hands, when we get to doing the hands and we want to stuff this little tiny thumb, you really can get in there with the tip of these hemostats. So I'm just pinching and pushing all the way in there. And you're going to continue to do that until you have filled the leg. Now, one thing to keep in mind, especially for this project, since we're sewing it by machine mostly, what you want to do is not stuff it too high. I would stuff it and still leave about an inch and a quarter unstuffed here. It's just going to make it easier for you to sew all the different components together as you get along in the construction process, okay? So we'll do that to arms and legs. And then I go back, and what I do with these guys is after they're stuffed, and this is, again, for all four, both arms and both legs, I will line it up so that the seam that we sewed is going down the front center of the leg and down the back center. And I will just top stitch right here, about 1/8 of an inch or so away from the end. You can see that these guys have been done like that. And I find that that's just easier for alignment. I have less layers that are moving around on me when we go to attach these to the body. And the same thing goes for the arms when we go to attach it to the head. So let's work on the face next. Once your arms and legs are done, you're going to set those aside. For the face, you have one that's going to be the front of the face and one that's going to be the back. And then remember that we also have hair for the front and back. So for the face, you can decide to add whatever you want. If you don't want glasses on her, you don't have to. But you are going to want to probably put some hair on the front side here. And to do that, you really are just eyeballing it, because you're not going to fill her whole face with hair, right? We're just going to fold this in half and work our way around it. So you can just cut a curve. If you want to give her bangs, you can give her some bangs. If not, you can kind of just chop it straight across her head. So just cut whatever type of hairstyle you want to give your doll. Then you're going to take some glue-based it and just put a few dots in place. This is going to help keep the accessories, the glasses, the heart on the dress, all those type of little accessories that you're adding to your doll in place so you can go and top stitch them. So for this one, I would put some drops of glue. I would set it into place with an iron, making sure that I'm only hitting it from the back on the cotton side, okay, and not too hot. And then I'll go back with black thread, of course, so that it will blend in, and stitch it just on the front side, like inside the face. You don't have to worry about the outer part because it'll get sewn in a seam. So you'll do that for the front. For the back part of her hair, you want to leave some space here for the neck. So on that one, I just fold it in half, and you can mark this out with chalk if you'd like, but I just eyeball it. It's not that big a deal. You can do it like that and have the hair come all the way down, or you can cut it even shorter and have it come a little bit further up. But again, put a few dots to baste it into place with the glue, press it with the iron from the cotton side, and then just stitch it into place on the bottom edge right here, okay? Once the front and the back of the head are done, if you wanted glasses at this point, this is when you would do that same thing as well. And I would just put a few dots of the glue, baste it, put the eyes or the eyeglasses right where you want them, put your hair, and you can see that you're starting to put the face together, okay? After you have these guys done and top stitched into place, then you're gonna wanna decide on the hair issue. If it's a girl and you wanna add a little ponytail to her, you can go ahead and do that. You'd have to cut the pieces out of the die as well. But if you are gonna be doing a ponytail, let me show you real quick. I'm just gonna pretend that this is a ponytail because I didn't cut it out of the die. But I want you all to note where you're gonna have to line up. Say this is the ponytail. We want something coming out of her head this way. When we sew these two together, pretty sides touching, you can't have anything sticking out like this. So if you have pigtails or a ponytail, it will have to be tucked in. So line it up where you want it, flip it back just so you can see if it's at the right height that you want it, and tuck it back inside on top of the face. Then we would sew pretty sides to pretty sides, okay? So keep that in mind. Any pigtails or anything sticking out of the head needs to be tucked inside. Then you would go back and stitch this into place. Again, 1/4 inch seam allowance. Back stitch here, come up, work your way around the curve, and come down and back stitch, okay? Flip that head right side out, and then you'll be ready to start attaching your arms first. Now, when you're ready to attach the arms, you want to make sure that we're lining up the center side seams right on the arm with the neck seam that's on the side of the doll. So to do that and to orient it correctly so her little thumb is facing up, you want to line it up. You put her with her face up first, and then I'm gonna put it so that her thumb is kind of on her face, okay? And just to double check, all you need to do is hold it in place and flip her arm down. If the thumb is up, then you know you have it oriented correctly. So we'll line that up there. Now, a few different tips, because you can see this is a really small opening to be working with. So if this is your first project, this is definitely gonna require some patience on your part, but it's totally doable. I'm lining up these center seams. There's a few different ways that you can hold this in place because as you can see, even with pins, this is really tight and small to take over to my sewing machine. You can use some steam-a-seam, like this adhesive tape, and put a little bit there and hit it with an iron to help hold it in place. You can try to baste it with some glue. You can even hand stitch it, and then you can kind of maneuver it a little bit better in your machine to stitch it into place. But that's what you're gonna do. You'd go back and machine stitch it with the 1/4 inch seam allowance right here. Do that to both arms, and you can see that she's starting to come together. Once you have that in place, you are going to want to put together the dress, the body part. So from our die, we cut out 2 of the dresses, okay? At this point, I would take my little heart. Do I have it here somewhere? Any little embellishment that you have, here it is, and place it right there, okay? And glue it right where you want to. You want to have something on the front so that it can let you know which is the front and the back. But as you can see on this doll, I didn't add any extra embellishment. So really, you can make it any way that you want to. But once you have that, you're going to put these pretty sides together. Use that 1/4 inch seam. You're going to stitch here, come around. You're only stitching down the sides. So back stitch down here, and then you're going to do the same thing on this one and stop right there, okay? Then if you notice, again, we have a little directional change right here. It goes straight and then it starts to curve out. So right in those areas, you have to clip that little notch. So you have that like that, okay? Now we're ready to start putting together the top head with the arms and the body of the doll. So to do that, let me just clip this one here in place so I can show you all. You have something like this, right? And you have the body. you want to kind of squish her together face up and lay the body so that it's whatever the front is face up. So I can see my heart, that's the front. And I want it so that her face is going face up the same as the little heart embellishment. And you're gonna tuck her in here. Notice it's going in through the bottom of the dress. And I'm gonna push it out until the neck matches up with this top portion here. So this is probably going to be the part that requires the most patience. This is, I would say, the trickiest part of it all. Now, if you lined up those center seams on the arms with the neck seam correctly, then you can just line up that center seam with the side seams of the dress at this point. You can see right there. Again, really tight, small space, so baste it with some hand stitching if you want to, okay? And I would just do that. Match up the other side on the opposite edge as well. And then I like to put pins or glue based or whatever method you're going to do by hand stitching on the centers of the other side. So basically split it up into quarters so that it stays nice and even. Now this point, you can see it's kind of small. You'll have to still sew it by machine. You can do it by hand to help keep it in place, but I find that you just get a cleaner finish when you do sew it in by the machine. Once you do that, flip it out and you're going to end up with this one here. You see the head, the arms, and the body is now attached up here. So the last thing we have to do is attach our legs. So the little stocking legs here, what I do is, notice how I oriented them. You lay her with her whole face facing up, and we get the stockings and we put it to basically where she's kind of kicking herself in the face, and that's the correct orientation. Again, to double check, hold it in place and flip it back. If the front of her feet are going up, then you know you have it in the right spot. I'm going to place these here, matching up the raw edges. Just notice, just on the front of the dress, the back is still open because we still have to stuff her. Put some pins here and you're going to stitch this into place 1/4 of an inch up into the legs. So let's head over to the sewing machine and actually stitch that part up. I have my straight stitch. I'm going to shorten it a little bit to about a 1.6 or so. Now to do this, I don't want to stitch through the back layer, so I'm just going to work it out to push that out of the way. All right, so now that you have that sewn into place, you can flip it down and you can see that the whole front of her body is done. So through the back here is where you're going to start again with your polyfill. Grab your hemostats and stuff it. Now notice her head hasn't been stuffed. So when you start stuffing, you got to stuff it up through the neck and fill in her head first and then fill in the body. After you have that done, remember, don't overstuff it because it'll make it harder for you to stitch up this closing here. But after I do that, I like that the seam allowance gets tucked under by the legs. So then all I have to do on the back part here is fold it under myself in the same seam allowance. Fold it under. I like to give it a good press with everything in there. And then I just whip stitch it shut by hand. And I find that that really just gives a nice clean closure. You can see you'll end up with something like that. And if you don't want to hand stitch, you can totally take it to the machine and just do a stitch across the bottom. Just make sure that you're grabbing all the layers of fabric. All right, so once we stitch that shut, all we need to do is go back and decide how you want to finish embellishing her face. On my little Kid Giddy doll here, what I did was took some embroidery floss and I just did a little French knot, and that made 2 perfect little eyes right in the glasses. You can go ahead and take it a step further and add a nose or a mouth if you want to, but otherwise your Kid Giddy doll is complete. So I hope you all enjoyed this video tutorial, and if you did, hit the video with the thumbs up below, share it across the different social media sites, and don't forget to click the subscribe button so you won't miss out on my future videos. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.